I have a question, which is, how many type A personalities do I have in this room? I thought so. Because I'd like to point out that it is sunny outside, it's springtime, and it's a Saturday, and you're here. And you're here with a 1-month-old baby. So I think that you, more than anybody else, qualifies as a type A personality. What I wanted to do today is share with you how remarkable women like you can zigzag through to the top by taking advantage of all the opportunities that are going to come your way. I've come to believe that successful people are those individuals who accept personal challenges as a potential opportunity. In today's political and professional environment, daily challenges are going to constantly be thrown your way. And the key is that you need to have the ability to come out looking unfazed and on top of things. If you do so, you're going to ultimately succeed. But you have to be creative. You're going to find out soon enough that life never seems to follow the perfect plan that you've unfolded in your mind. You have to be creative, and you have to develop that ability to accept things. And this is going to be really difficult for people like the women in this room, because we pride ourselves on controlling our environment and our reaction to it. And that's why they call us type A people. And I particularly know their pain and your pain because I am one. Type A women, not the women in this room, I'm sure, exhaustively plan every detail of their life, utterly convinced that if we set the parameters, we're going to follow this nice linear path to success. I'm sure that's what today's meeting is about, is putting your linear path to success together. And I realize this because I have done that myself, and I am a type A person. And I will tell you, it's a blessing and it's a curse. We target the right schools, internships, contacts. Unfortunately, life is never linear. And that you need to learn early, and you're going to learn it often. I've heard men and women detail in great exactitude their timeline for marriage in the exact personality of their future spouse, as if they were filling out an application for Harvard Business School. In fact, I dated one man who had ambitions to be successful on Wall Street and in politics. And one night he sat me down and he pulls out these little spreadsheets, and he pulls out a timeline and a chart, and he explains to me in great detail how my personality and my abilities were going to complement his plan. Yeah. I had other plans. My plans included working for Ronald Reagan at the White House and the Defense Department, where I enjoyed a front row seat watching the collapse of the Soviet Union. I did this early in my career, in my early 20s, and after my time spent in Washington, I joined Intel when Intel was a $1.5 billion company. It's a little bigger now. You know, I moved from Washington to Intel pretty seamlessly, and I was so proud that my life was proceeding right according to plan. My first job was serving as assistant to Intel's chairman, Craig Barrett, when he was senior vice president of manufacturing. At that time, Craig turned around manufacturing worldwide, and he set a new standard for high technology. Working for Craig, I discovered how a napkin was the best medium for summarizing a plan of action. I learned very quickly that my ability to communicate and identify objectives and key results were going to make me a successful person at Intel. I also learned a lot about how executives managed. Those that were able to precisely define exactly the outcomes that they wanted from the responsibilities that they delegated, those were the most successful managers. And they forced the business divisions that worked for them to constantly monitor and measure results. I then recently had the opportunity to work in Nagoya, Japan, home of Toyota Motor Corporation. Deanne Owen, who was my special assistant at the time and qualifies as a type A personality because she's here and she no longer works for me. We had a chance to spend a lot of time with Dr. Shoshiro Toyota, who was the honorary chair of Toyota Motor Corporation, and he was also the chairman of Japan's World's Fair. I gained unique insights into how Toyota applied its amazing manufacturing process to the design and the management of the World's Fair. And then they've used the fair to launch Nagoya, Toyota's hometown, as a manufacturing economic center in Asia and the world. You may have seen the recent articles in the Wall Street Journal and in Time magazine, and if anybody's flown United recently, there was a long article about Nagoya. So it's interesting how they've taken this brand concept of the fair, using Toyota's techniques, and branding a city. And branding not only a city, but branding a way that they operate, a value system that they have. The big jump over time and experience working at Intel and then working at the World's Fair, it wasn't seamless, and it didn't proceed according to my perfect plan. Let me fill you in on what happens when a Type A woman is dealt a hand that she never expected. On a personal level, I was married when I was 32, so that was on plan. That was sort of when I thought I'd get married. I adopted my daughter when I was 34. I thought I'd have a child when I was 34. It was very nice for someone to hand me a prepackaged one. So I was still on plan. And then 8 months later, my husband Jim was diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. And all of a sudden, my world changed, and my Type A personality, it was put to the biggest test possible. Jim was in the middle of a startup. On the day of his first cancer surgery, the money from the venture capital firm passed into his company's account. During the operation, they cut the nerves that control his ability to speak. So for the first 6 months of his startup, he could barely talk. He kept moving forward. He'd chosen the right partners. He never gave up. Despite numerous surgeries and invasive medical procedures, he stayed on course. 18 months later, Jim sold his company to a Fortune 500. We were very fortunate. But our life and the changes in our life and the changes that have been created in his life because of his disease have forced me to continuously streamline my business and political work. And I look to always create high-profile opportunities that don't require my physical presence. The key for me is I have to stay active, I have to stay visible, but I can't physically be there all the time. I tapped into the fantastic women who worked for me at the company that I ran, and they managed all the projects that I had on site at the high-tech companies with whom we dealt. Then we sat down and we figured out how to take advantage of my personal assets, of my brain trust, and we developed turnkey brand solutions that we could sell to clients at a much higher price. Politically then, because I've always been active in politics, I wanted to think about activities that would be flexible but impactful. So I focused on e-campaigns, radio interviews, and fundraising. My point in telling you this personal story, and I wrote this speech so that I could deliver it to women like yourself. I recently gave it at Thunderbird, the Garvin School of International Management, is because I want other people to understand that no matter how on track your life appears to be, you're not going to be able to control what tomorrow might bring. So what I hope to do today is pass on 4 words of advice to you. First, work with smart people who have a vision. Always surround yourself with smart people who get things done. But you need to be prepared to be judged by your deliverables and your ability to quantify your results. At Intel, one of the top executives with whom I worked was described as being, he liked to work with smart people. Okay, that seemed logical to me. It wasn't particularly awe-inspiring. Everybody wants to work with smart people. But then I learned the Intel definition of what smart really meant. The world judges people by their schooling, how they're ranked on tests, their family backgrounds, their resume highlights. It's one reason that you all are here today talking about those things. But what I learned is that smart people can apply processes and systems to identifying and solving complex problems. They're individuals who understand law, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. They're people who go out and learn management techniques, but then they learn how to take those management techniques and turn them into actionable, measurable results. So as I listen to you talking about what degree do I go for next, what job do I take next, what I want you to do is think about developing the expertise in a particular area. For me, my expertise has been branding. That's what's carried me forward in every job that I've had. I learned about process management. I learned about operations at Intel. I can take that skill set that I learned at the age of 24, and now I apply it through every job that I take. So never forget that step, because it is the most important step, and unfortunately in Washington, people don't always remember that. One thing I learned, and what was interesting to me, is I've worked with a lot of mid-level managers at Toyota and Intel. So yes, I've known a lot of famous people. I've known the people who ran the company, but I've also met all of the people who work in the company, the people that create the products that many of us in this room use. They didn't attend the top schools. They didn't have an Ivy League experience. They didn't come from the right family background. But they demonstrated a logical thought process which enabled them to assess a situation, apply the problem-solving skills to which they had been exposed. They took engineering techniques, as we talked about that Toyota did with the World's Fair, and they applied those to solving a problem. What was really interesting, and is a key thing for you always to keep in mind as you evolve your own career, is that these smart people, they never get pulled into the weeds. But instead, they step back, they look at an array of information, they think about the key elements, they realign those elements in order to solve a problem. In both companies, the individuals who are articulate and could say what needed to happen in a precise and concise fashion, again, not always something that happens in Washington, those were the people that are successful. I always had a lot of admiration for Caspar Weinberger, and one reason was that he wanted all the information from his people that worked for him on one sheet of paper. Well, has anybody worked at the Pentagon? Anybody in this room, or worked with any of the DoD people? Well, trust me, this is a very difficult challenge for a building that's filled with very top-level people who want to demonstrate the veracity of their statements by providing a pile, and I mean a pile of backup information. And the secretary, he'd take all that information that they'd spent hours and hours putting together, and he'd throw it back to them, and he'd say, give it to me on one sheet of paper. Because he knew exactly what he wanted, and he precisely defined the outcomes that he wanted, and he only needed the core bit of information in order to move forward and solve whatever problem he was responsible for solving. My second recommendation to you is peel back the onion. As a consultant, I have the luxury of peeling back the onion. And what I know, having been an executive, is that when you're in the middle of fire drills and the daily routines of corporate life, you don't have a chance to step back and assess what's going on. You don't have the time to identify and solve the problems. And you can't really figure out what's inhibiting an effort from moving forward because you just don't have the time to go back and peel back the onion and find out what's that boulder that's not so apparent, but for some reason something's not working. So remember, it's very important to figure out how things work and obtain a detailed level of understanding of how all those pieces fit together. With this, combine who you know with what you know. A phrase often repeated is that people reach the level of their own incompetence. Well, after 20 years in politics, I can tell you that is a very accurate statement. I have watched people move through a variety of jobs based on incredible networking skills. But what I have always noticed is that they never took the time to understand management principles. They never understood cause and results. Sometimes you'll find that they reach a very senior level job, but they fail to understand how the system works. And they don't understand what elements within the bureaucracy intertwine and result in failed policies. We have a lot of that going on right now. And from what I learned in watching those people is, yes, you want to work with really smart people, but they're not the best known people. And you want to get them on your team. What you need to do is think about your address book. You're young. Your address book is going to grow. Mine's got about 6,000 people in it right now, I think. But I always look at it as this pool of best-of-class talent that I can tap into and bring in to every single project in which I'm involved. Finally, and most importantly, manage your personal life. Accept the fact that your life, it's not entirely controllable. And often the people in your life, whether they're your family members or your friends, no matter how much you love them or respect them, they're going to present you with life's greatest challenges and life's greatest rewards. But you need to remember how to integrate your professional and your personal life in such a way that it keeps you committed to what's important to your life's plan. Today, you're figuring out your life's plan. You're figuring out your career. But there are going to be a lot of things that pop up that aren't what you expect, and you need to zigzag to get there. You need to think about, okay, what's my plan? I see the end game, but it's not a linear path to reaching it. So in a nutshell, what I learned is take the opportunities that are around you and make the most of them. Develop and rely on a best-of-class professional personal team to serve as resources and bring them into whatever project in which you are involved. Most importantly, always leave a deliverable at every step of the way. Because the things that you build and that last, and that's the key, you build it, it's got to last. That is what speaks to your impact on the world around you. And if you think of people through life that may have passed away at an early age, what do we remember? We remember what they left behind. We remember, in some cases, the magnificent lives that they had, because all along through their life, not knowing where their life would end, they always built things, they always left something behind, then they moved forward. But there's another key in all this. It's not just about you. It's helping others succeed. Your personal team is going to become stronger. Today, you've developed a personal team of women that I don't know if you all met each other before you came into this room or if this is a new meeting for some of you. But what you need to remember is that your team is going to grow stronger if you help all of your friends up the political, professional, and philanthropic ladder. There's going to be times like I've had where you have to step away from your career. And at the same time, your address book doesn't disappear. Your network doesn't disappear. You have an opportunity if you hear about a job that you can't take. You can say, hey, I can't take that job, but so-and-so can. And then you make sure that that person has access to your address book and that they're successful. Because if we each keep helping each other up, it's easier to step off the train for a little bit for whatever reason that you have to, whether it's having a baby, whether it's getting married, whether it's dealing with a family illness. And finally, never give up, but always be willing to regroup. In closing, I want to share a quote that I love from The Confusion by Neal Stephenson. Has anybody ever read any of Neal Stephenson's books? They're a little complicated. I actually haven't read the whole book, but my husband loves it. He read this quote and he said, this is you. You need to tell people about this quote. The book is about the primary character. Her name's Eliza. She's a countess, and she lost everything. You know, the typical book. She loses everything. Life goes to hell in a handbasket. She travels around the world rebuilding her wealth. But she was a pretty interesting person, Eliza. She said, pay attention. That's all. Notice things. Connect what you've noticed. Connect it into a picture. Think of how the picture might be changed and act to change it. Some of your acts may turn out to be very, very foolish, but others will reward you in very surprising ways. And simply by being active instead of passive, you have a kind of immunity that's hard to explain. Remember, whatever acts can't be destroyed.